Let's jump right in. Today, we're unpacking one of the most intense and honestly unexpected moments in all of ancient literature. It's the answer the man named Job finally gets after going through just unimaginable suffering. And trust me, it is not the answer you or anyone would ever see coming. You know, it all starts with this one question. A question that I think everybody has asked at some point. Why do good people suffer? That question, that's the absolute core of the book of Job. So you have Job, right? He loses everything. I mean, his family, his money, his health, it's all gone. But here's what makes his story so fascinating. He doesn't just pray for things to get better. Nope. He demands an explanation. He literally wants to take God to court and argue his case. And that sets up the first part of our journey today, the confrontation. This is where Job throws down the gauntlet and presents his challenge directly to God. So what exactly was Job's complaint? Well, he basically claimed that God was being completely unfair, that he was suffering for no reason at all. And all he wanted was a chance, a fair hearing to stand before God and prove he was innocent. So after all this time, all this suffering and silence, God finally shows up. And he speaks to Job from a whirlwind, which is just incredible. But this is where the story takes a huge, unexpected turn. God doesn't answer Job's question. Instead, he starts asking questions of his own. This brings us right into the divine response. And it's not a legal argument or a philosophical debate. It's basically a tour of creation, and its whole purpose is to completely shift Job's perspective. God's first lesson here is all about scale. It kind of reminds me of when God told Abraham, hey, look up at the sky and count the stars, if you can. So this is where God starts to just blow Job's mind, expanding his worldview, starting with the cosmos itself. And where does this tour begin? With something we can almost get our heads around, our own planet. The Earth is about 40,000 kilometers around. Now, that's a huge distance for us, right? But in this cosmic lesson, it's just the first tiny step on a very, very big ladder. And from there, the scale just explodes. Get this, you could fit 1.3 million Earths inside our sun. Just like that, our entire world, everything we know, becomes like a single grain of sand. But hold on, because even our sun is kind of small fry in the grand scheme of things. Look at this number, 520 million. That's how many of our suns could fit inside just one star, Betelgeuse. I mean, the scale here is it's absolutely mind-bending. So what's the big finish to this cosmic journey? Well, scientists figure there are about 100 trillion stars out there. It would take you 100 trillion years just to count them. And through all of this, God is basically asking Job one simple question. So Job, where were you when I put all this together? Okay, so after that tour of the universe, God brings Job's focus back down to earth. But he shows him a part of it that runs completely outside of human control. And this is what we're calling the wild witness, lessons from untamed beasts. God points to the animal kingdom to show a world that's running on its own logic, a logic totally separate from ours. I mean, think about it. Wild donkeys, they just know where to find salt lands. Wild oxen, you can't tame them. The ostrich? Maybe not the wisest bird by our standards, but boy is it fast. And migratory birds, they travel thousands of kilometers with no compass, no map. The point is, all around Job is this incredibly complex, ordered world that he has no control over and doesn't even fully get. And then God gets really specific. He introduces two incredible creatures, starting with Behemoth. It's described as the largest of all creatures God made. And get this, its tail sways like a giant cedar tree. So what on earth is this thing? Well, for a long time, people thought it was a hippopotamus. And okay, a hippo's a big plant eater that lives near water, so that part fits. But have you seen a hippo's tail? It's tiny. So the text seems to point to something else. Maybe something like a huge dinosaur. Think of an Argentinosaurus. A tail like a cedar tree? Absolutely. Largest of all creatures? Yeah, that fits a whole lot better. Next up, we have Leviathan. And this creature, this is the ultimate symbol of raw, untamable power. It's so big, so fierce that no human could ever hope to challenge it. And the message to Job is crystal clear. If you can't even handle one of my creatures, how could you possibly think you can question me, its creator? The mystery of Leviathan gets even deeper, though. The text says it breathes fire. It talks about flames shooting from its mouth and smoke pouring from its nostrils. Which, leads to a pretty wild question. Could an animal like that actually exist? Now, I know, it sounds like something straight out of a fantasy story, but think about some of the crazy things that exist in our world right now. You've got the bombardier beetle, which literally shoots a boiling hot chemical spray at its enemies, or the electric eel, generating thousands of volts of electricity. So while we haven't found a fire-breathing dragon yet, these examples show that nature is capable of some pretty extraordinary stuff. The idea is that maybe, just maybe, the description of Leviathan was meant to be taken literally. And all of this incredible tour of the cosmos, this parade of wild, untamable beasts, it's all leading up to the climax of the story. This is Job's great epiphany. It's the moment he goes from just hearing about God to truly seeing him. Job's first reaction to this overwhelming display? Complete silence. He just says, "I am insignificant. I will say no more." He puts his hand over his mouth, which was an ancient way of showing total submission and respect. He finally, truly understands his place in the universe. But this silence, it wasn't him just giving up. No, it was the quiet just before a massive, life-changing realization. And this is the line the entire book has been building towards. Job says, "I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you." What he's saying is that his whole understanding has changed. It's not just some idea he heard about anymore, not some secondhand story. It's a direct, personal, overwhelming experience of God's power and majesty. And that brings us to our final section, the resolution. This is where we see what happens after Job's encounter and what the ultimate lesson of this whole story really is. So, what happens after this incredible epiphany? Well, first, God turns to Job's friends and tells them their simple, easy answers about suffering were just plain wrong. Then, in this amazing moment of grace, God has Job pray for his friends. And after that, Job's fortunes are completely restored. In fact, he gets back double what he had before. He goes on to live another 140 years, seeing his family flourish for 4 generations. And this is where we find the ultimate takeaway. See, God never actually tells Job why he suffered. The answer wasn't an explanation. It was a revelation of who God is. So the lesson isn't about figuring out the reason for our suffering, but about learning to trust in a divine purpose that operates on a scale so much bigger than our own. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. The story of Job really makes you wonder. When we're faced with a reality that's just so much bigger than we are, whether it's incredible suffering or incredible beauty, is an explanation really what we need? Or is it something else? Is it a brand new perspective?